The cold fluorescent lights flickered above, humming faintly in the quiet hallway of St. Julian's private hospital. Everything smelled sterile, like bleach and polished ambition. Elliot Crane stood motionless, his custom-tailored charcoal suit a sharp contrast to the softness of the pink bundle in the woman's trembling arms. "You don't even want to hold him?" The woman's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. She looked exhausted, hollowed out by hours of labor and months of hope. Her auburn hair clung damply to her forehead, and her hospital gown clung to her frail frame. Elliot didn't move. His jaw tightened. "No," he said flatly. "I told you what this was." Her arms instinctively tightened around the infant. The baby stirred, letting out a small, whimpering cry. She glanced down at the tiny face, so perfect, so helpless, and then looked up again, her eyes now filled with disbelief. "You're seriously walking away?" Elliot sighed, annoyed. "We agreed. It was a mistake. You said you were on birth control. I was—" she started, but the words dissolved into a gasp, as if speaking them made everything more real. "You think he's a mistake? If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from." "I think he's not mine," Elliot snapped. "And even if he were—" He paused, composing himself. "I'm not interested in playing house. You knew that. I don't do attachments." A nurse passed by silently, eyes flicking from the crying mother to the unreadable man in the suit. She didn't stop. She'd seen this scene before, not with the same faces but the same cruelty. "You're a monster," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "He has your eyes." Elliot's gaze shifted to the child just for a second. Something flickered, something he buried fast. "DNA means nothing. I owe you nothing." He turned. His leather shoes echoed down the hallway, each step colder than the last. The hospital doors hissed open at the end, letting in a gust of winter air. He didn't look back. Behind him, the woman's shoulders shook silently as she buried her face in the baby's blanket. The newborn let out another soft cry, the kind of sound that reaches into a heart. "If the heart's still human," she whispered to the child, kissing his forehead. "You'll never need him, you hear me? Never." Outside, Elliot climbed into the back seat of a sleek black car. His driver glanced at him through the mirror. "Congratulations, sir," the driver offered uncertainly. "Drive," Elliot muttered, loosening his tie. "And don't ever mention today again." As the city skyline swallowed them whole, Elliot leaned back and closed his eyes, not in guilt, but in dismissal. He had meetings tomorrow, investors waiting, towers to build. That chapter, whatever it was, had ended the moment he walked out of that hallway. But chapters don't end that easily. Some grow in silence, some grow teeth. The apartment always smelled like reheated noodles and something faintly sour that never quite left the walls. Cracks crept along the ceiling like veins, and the radiator clicked constantly, as if it was trying to say something but never could. Jay sat cross-legged on the floor, his schoolbook spread out in front of him. Third-grade math blurred under dim yellow light. The noise of the upstairs neighbors, shouting again, bounced through the walls. He tried to focus, but his stomach growled louder. "Dinner in 10, Lena called from the kitchen. Her voice was tired, but she forced a little lift into it. She always tried to sound like she wasn't drowning. Jay didn't respond. He just stared at a question about fractions, eyes glassy. He was hungry, but mostly he was tired. Of everything. The front door was still missing a lock. The groceries were always just enough, and when he asked why they moved every year, Lena would just say, "New start," like that explained anything. At school, Jay kept his head down. Teachers said he was bright but distant. The other kids called him Charity Kid. Some whispered that his mom was a maid or worse. One boy asked him once, "Why doesn't your dad ever come to anything?" Jay had punched him. When Lena found out, she didn't yell. She just sat across from him on the edge of the couch, her hands folded, trembling slightly. "You can't fight your way through that question every time it comes up," she said quietly. Jay stared at the floor. Then tell me what to say. She looked at him and something in her cracked. You say nothing, you hear me? Nothing, you don't say his name, you don't even think it. But I... Jay's voice wavered. Don't I at least get to know who he was? Lena leaned. He was nobody, she said, almost spitting the words. Just a man with money and no heart. He made a choice. He left. Jay swallowed hard. Does he even know my name? She didn't answer. After that night, the subject died. But the silence became its own kind of presence, humming in the background of every birthday, every school event, every scraped knee when Lena came running alone. Jay learned to keep his emotions neat and folded, like the laundry Lena sorted while watching her night classes on a cracked laptop screen. He never saw her cry, but he often heard her from the hallway when she thought he was asleep. By 12, Jay was already finding ways to make money, fixing phones, selling old textbooks online, tutoring younger kids. Anything to help. Anything to build. But still, at night he'd lie in bed and stare at the ceiling, wondering about the man with no name, wondering if he had his eyes, his voice, his ambition, wondering if somewhere that man ever felt even a flicker of regret. And every time those thoughts came, Jay would clench his fists under the covers. He would never chase the man who walked away. But someday, he wanted to be the one who made him chase. 10 years passed like blinking lights on a Manhattan skyline, fast, bright, and hard to track. Elliot Crane stood at the top of it all, untouched by recession, scandal, or guilt. His name was printed on the side of 5 luxury towers across New York and whispered in every private equity circle as the man who bets cold and wins colder. Crane Holdings had just acquired a riverfront redevelopment deal worth over $300 million. Another notch in his ever-growing empire. Another city block turned into glass, steel, and profit. The gala was held inside his newest crown jewel, the Orion, a 40-floor skyscraper built entirely of obsidian glass and ego. Hundreds of guests sipped champagne under chandeliers designed in Italy and assembled in silence. Every suit cost more than a month's rent in the city. Every smile was a transaction. Elliot took the stage as cameras clicked and investors clapped. His face was still striking, barely aged, though lines had formed near his mouth, not from smiling but from clenched decisions. He adjusted the mic and scanned the crowd. When I started this company, he said smoothly, I had no safety net, no inheritance, no handouts, just vision, and the refusal to let anyone else steer the ship. The audience nodded in admiration. They loved a self-made myth. I built this alone, he continued, pausing for emphasis. Every inch, every dollar. Applause erupted. Somewhere in the crowd, a reporter jotted the quote down, framing it for tomorrow's front page. But no one noticed the way his left hand trembled slightly before slipping back into his pocket, or the way he glanced toward the balcony for half a second as if expecting someone or avoiding a memory. After the speech, Elliot moved through the crowd with practiced precision, handshakes, toasts, brief smirks. He gave just enough warmth to seem human, but never more. Never enough to let anyone close. Back in his penthouse hours later, he stood alone with a drink in hand, staring out at the cityscape. The lights below shimmered like promises he no longer believed in. He never married, never had another child. Relationships were distractions. Everything he needed, he could buy. Everything he wanted, he already owned. Or so he told himself. Behind him, awards lined the walls. Real estate mogul of the year, man of influence, Forbes top 50. Not one family photo, not one personal frame. He took a slow sip of scotch. He didn't remember the child's birthday, couldn't recall the mother's last name. All of that had been locked away in the back room of his mind, filed under irrelevant. The phone on his desk buzzed. A notification. An article. Silicon Valley startup disrupts market with shocking acquisition. Elliot didn't click it. He poured another drink instead, But outside the glass walls of his tower in a different city, someone was watching. Someone who hadn't forgotten. The article barely made a ripple in Elliot Crane's world. Tech headlines didn't usually matter to real estate kings, but the name kept reappearing in whispers, then meetings, then emails stamped urgent. Jay Lennox. In Silicon Valley, it wasn't just buzz, it was disruption. In less than 2 years, Lennox Innovations had bought out 2 mid-sized fintech firms, launched a consumer payment system, and quietly filed a patent that shook legacy banks to their core. Venture capitalists scrambled to buy in. Analysts begged for interviews, but no one had seen Lennox in person. There were no press photos, no social media. Just one initial on the paperwork, and a deep-pocketed presence that moved with surgical precision. In a cramped apartment in Palo Alto, Jay Lennox, formerly just Jay, son of a man who forgot him, sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by laptops, pitch decks, and whiteboards. A quiet fire simmered in his chest. The same one that had burned since he was a boy with questions no one would answer. "You know they're going to start digging soon," said Amir, his co-founder and closest friend. "We can't stay ghosts forever." Jay didn't look up. "Let them dig." He clicked open an email, legal docs from the most recent acquisition. A line of investors scrolled across the screen. One name made his finger freeze. Talon Circle Capital. Jay's eyes narrowed. That wasn't a person. That was a shell. And he knew exactly who was behind it. Elliot Crane. The man who had refused to hold him. The man who claimed to build everything alone. The man who was now, unknowingly, funding the son he once discarded. Jay leaned back, a strange mix of rage and satisfaction bubbling just beneath his skin. It wasn't enough to succeed. It wasn't even enough to surpass. He needed proximity. He needed to look Elliot in the eyes, shake his hand, and watch him trust the very thing he never wanted. He needed him close. "This changes things," Jay murmured. Amir raised a brow. "What?" "We're offering advisory seats," Jay said, already drafting an internal memo. "I want one sent directly to Talon Circle. Executive tier, top dollar, all the bells and whistles. You're inviting Elliot Crane into the company." Amir blinked. "I thought the whole point was staying under radar." Jay's voice was quiet but razor sharp. "He won't know it's me. Not at first." Amir hesitated. "And later?" Jay gave the smallest smile. "Later, he'll know. Everything." Across the country, Elliot's assistant slid a proposal across his desk. "New AI startup, fresh tech, brilliant team. They want you on the advisory board." Elliot barely glanced at it. "Startups are for kids. Compensation packages, sizable," she added, "and their founder specifically asked for you." That made him pause. He picked up the packet. At the top, embossed in clean, bold font, Lennox Innovations. He ran his finger over the name, curiosity piqued. The logo was sharp, modern, hungry. He had no idea who Jay Lennox was, but that was about to change. The envelope was black. No logo, no return address. Just a silver-embossed name at the center. Elliot Crane. It rested atop his morning pile of filtered mail, like a challenge wrapped in mystery. Elliot sliced it open with a letter opener shaped like a dagger, one of many ego-driven gifts from gala sponsors. He expected another charity request, another award nomination, maybe a pitch from some forgettable startup. What he found instead stopped him cold. Position: Senior Strategic Advisor, Lennox Innovations, base compensation, 2.4 M per annum plus performance. Equity plus discretionary bonuses term, 1 year minimum. Non-compete and NDA clauses enclosed attached was a personal note in clean serif type. "We admire your legacy. We don't want your past. We want your mind and your instincts. The future needs sharper architects. Join us." Jay Lennox, no. Signature. No title. Just that name again. Lennox. He set the letter down, reached for his espresso, and stared out over the skyline. His reflection ghosted against the glass, older, sharper, more alone than he ever let himself feel. An offer like this didn't come out of nowhere. A few keystrokes later, he pulled up the company dossier. Lennox Innovations, aggressive growth, sharp pivoting, multiple acquisitions, still private. Their valuation had tripled in under a year. Everyone was talking, but no one knew who ran the ship. He clicked through every article. No photos, no background, just glowing praise and whispered speculation. "I want a meeting," Elliot told his assistant that afternoon. Lennox, in person, discreetly. "They already scheduled one," she said, handing him a calendar invite. "Tomorrow. They said you'd say yes." That gave him pause. He smirked slightly. Cocky, confident, calculated. He liked that. Clear. "My morning," he said, "and send someone to vet the NDA." In Palo Alto, Jay watched from behind tinted glass as the private courier returned from Crane Holdings. The signed agreement was in his hand. He bit, Amir said from the other side of the room. "You sure you're ready for this?" Jay didn't respond right away. He stared at the signature, Elliot M. Crane, black ink across white paper. Smooth, elegant, detached, just like the man himself. "I don't want him destroyed," Jay said quietly. Amir tilted his head. "No?" Jay's eyes darkened. "Not yet." He stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the city shimmered, blind to the storm quietly building above. "I want him close," Jay whispered. In the room, smiling, comfortable. He tapped the glass once, then I'll show him what he helped build. The lobby of Lennox Innovations was unlike anything Elliot had seen, and he'd seen everything. Minimalist in design but maximal in presence, the space buzzed with quiet efficiency. Matte black walls, soft ambient lighting, no receptionist. Just silence, interrupted by sleek sliding doors and distant conversations muffled behind glass. He checked the time. Exactly 9 a.m. The doors opened with a whisper. "Mr. Crane," said a voice, smooth, confident. A young man stepped forward, hand extended. Late 20s, early 30s at most. Tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. His presence was sharp but controlled. Calm, but not submissive. "Jay Lennox," the young man said. "Appreciate you making the trip." Elliot shook, his hand, brow furrowing slightly. There was something about the grip, firm, intentional, and the eyes. Brown, steady, almost familiar. But he couldn't place it. "You run this place?" Elliot asked, glancing around. "I built it," Jay replied simply. "From the ground up." A flicker of respect passed over Elliot's face, quickly masked. "Impressive. You're younger than I expected." "I get that a lot," Jay said, smiling politely. "Would you like a tour, or should we get to the point?" "Point," Elliot said. Jay led him into a corner office, sleek, minimalist, but filled with subtle power moves. A single sculpture in the center, a whiteboard covered in equations and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the valley. They sat across from each other. Jay offered espresso. Elliot declined. Jay clasped his hands. "We don't need your name to sell credibility. We've already got the numbers. What we do need is your mind, your instinct, your reputation as someone who can see the collapse before the tremor." Elliot tilted his head. "And what do you get out of that?" "I'm not a yes man. I don't mentor. I don't flatter." Jay didn't flinch. "We want you precisely because you don't." Elliot leaned back, studying him. "Why me?" Jay paused. "Just long enough." "I've followed your work for years," he said. "Your rise during the 2008 crash. How you turned dead properties into gold. You read patterns others ignore. That's rare." Elliot's ego softened slightly. He liked being studied, admired. "You really built all this?" he asked, nodding toward the skyline. Jay smiled faintly. "Piece by piece. No inheritance, no family name. Just a stubborn refusal to stay small." Elliot chuckled. "That I respect." There was a beat of silence. Jay let it linger. "So," he continued, opening a sleek black folder, "here's our roadmap for the next fiscal year. I'd like your insights on Phase 2 strategy, particularly where we lean into risk. That's your sweet spot, isn't it? Elliot took the folder, scanned the documents, impressed despite himself. As they worked, Jay asked sharp questions, challenged weak points, and listened carefully. It was clear, this wasn't some rich kid with a lucky algorithm. This was a mind built in the fire. But even as Elliot focused on the charts, he occasionally found his gaze drifting. To the eyes, the posture, something about this young man gnawed at the edge of memory, like déjà vu without context. You remind me of someone, Elliot muttered. Jay looked up. His face remained unreadable. Maybe just someone you chose to forget. Elliot chuckled, brushing it off. Could be, but Jay didn't laugh. He only smiled. And behind that smile, the plan moved forward. Behind the polished glass of his office door, Jay Lennox closed the folder slowly. Elliot Crane's notes were sharp, handwritten in black ink, arrogant, incisive, and efficient, just like the man himself. Jay leaned back in his chair. He still hadn't told Amir. Not the full story. 3 years earlier, Jay stood outside a modest courthouse in Queens, a manila envelope clutched in his hand. The air was thick with summer heat and something heavier, something final. Inside the envelope, a sealed DNA report. He didn't open it right away. He didn't have to. He already knew. He'd known since he was 10, the first time he found an old eviction notice with the name Elliot M. Crane typed under landlord. He remembered showing it to Lena, his mother, thinking it was a coincidence. She'd snatched it from his hands, lips tight. "That's no one," she had whispered. "That's no one to us." But the way her hands trembled told him everything. By 14, Jay had memorized everything about the man. His business empire, his interviews, his public persona, the self-made narrative, the real estate king who said he built everything from nothing. By 16, Jay used a borrowed laptop and public library Wi-Fi to hire a private investigator, not to find Elliot, he was everywhere, but to track his weaknesses, his deals, his ego, his rhythms. By 18, Jay had a plan. Back in the present, Jay rose and walked to the large whiteboard behind his desk. On it was a mind map of everything Crane had touched in the last decade. Companies, people, habits, crossed out names, highlighted opportunities. Every move cataloged like a predator studying prey. Jay grabbed a marker and circled a box labeled advisory position in green. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Justice? No. Justice was for people who still believed in fairness. Jay didn't want balance. He wanted control. The kind Elliot had stolen the day he walked away from a newborn child and never looked back. He thought about Lena, about how she worked 2 jobs until her hands blistered, how she hid her tears until she couldn't, how she died alone in a hospice, her name never printed in any paper, her funeral attended by 6 people and a closed casket. Jay hadn't cried. He remembered standing at her grave and promising her something. Not peace, not closure, power. He whispered it then. He lived it now. The office door opened slightly. Amir peeked in. "Meeting with the UX team in 5. Jay nodded. "I'll be there." Amir hesitated. "You good?" Jay turned back toward the window, the city sprawling beneath him. "Yeah," he said. "Just reviewing history." Amir gave him a strange look, but didn't press. As the door closed again, Jay stared down at the streets. He imagined Elliot somewhere out there, walking through the same buildings he once claimed, not realizing he was now inside Jay's walls, breathing Jay's air. He wasn't going to expose him. He was going to employ him, keep him close, make him feel valued, then pull the rug out slowly, inch by inch, until the mighty Elliot Crane was standing on nothing. That's not revenge. That's art. The pen glided across the contract with practiced confidence. Elliot M. Crane, Senior Strategic Advisor. Lennox Innovations. He barely skimmed the fine print. Decades in boardrooms had conditioned him to trust gut over jargon. And Jay Lennox? The kid had vision, resources, and reverence, a rare combination. Elliot liked that. "Welcome aboard," Jay said with a firm handshake. Elliot offered a cool smirk. "Let's build something big." The next morning, his corner office awaited. Glass walls, executive desk, a panoramic view of the valley. Modern art hung with deliberate taste. A high-end espresso machine sat unused, but something was off. The receptionist barely glanced at him. Interns avoided eye contact. His keycard didn't work on 2 of the main floors. And when he tried to log into the company server, the system denied access, insufficient clearance. "Must be a setup glitch," he muttered, waving it off. Still, the silence pressed on him like static. At 10:15 sharp, Jay arrived with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning," he said. "Let's dive in." Elliot stood, ready for strategic briefings or high-stakes market analyses. Instead, Jay handed him a slim folder with a printed spreadsheet. "What's this?" Elliot asked. "User retention metrics from our beta app," Jay replied, cheerful. "We'd love your feedback on the drop-down filters." Elliot frowned. "This is intern work," Jay nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly. That's why your insight is so valuable. You'll see what they don't." Before Elliot could protest, Jay clapped him on the back. "You're here to mentor, right? Let's start at the foundation." He left without waiting for an answer. Over. The next week, things only got stranger. He was copied on emails but never directly addressed. Meetings were rescheduled without notice. A junior engineer once asked him to move out of a conference room. "We booked it first." He complied, stunned into silence. One afternoon, a package arrived at his desk. Inside, a branded hoodie and a note handwritten by Jay. "All team members wear this on Wednesdays. We believe in unity over hierarchy." Elliot stared at the sweatshirt. He hadn't worn anything without a collar since college. He didn't put on. But when he walked into the meeting that day, every person at the table, engineers, assistants, even Jay, wore theirs. The unspoken message was clear. He was the outsider. Elliot confronted Jay that evening. "I didn't come here to babysit," he snapped. "You brought me in for strategic leadership, not drop-down menus and team-building gimmicks." Jay leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "And I meant it. But leadership starts with humility. You taught me that, indirectly, of course." "What the hell does that mean?" Jay smiled. "It means this is just the beginning. Give it time. Elliot, you'll find your place here." Later that night, Elliot scrolled through the contract again, irritation simmering. The clauses were tighter than he remembered. Term limits, performance reviews, severance tied to team integration scores. Every exit route was lined with penalties. He tried calling a lawyer. His call went straight to voicemail. For the first time in decades, Elliot Crane felt something foreign creeping up his spine. Not anger. Not pride. Uncertainty. And somewhere in an unseen office with soundproof walls, Jay watched it all unfold on a silent security feed, frame by frame. The invitation came on thick, matte cardstock, hand-delivered by Jay's personal assistant, Yoert. "Executive dinner. Tonight, 7:30 p.m., location disclosed upon arrival. Attendance required." There was no RSVP. Just a time and a note handwritten at the bottom. "Wear something sharp. We'll be making memories." Elliot stared at the card for a long moment, jaw tight. After the week he'd had, pointless assignments, silent stares, the strange air of isolation, this felt like a lifeline. An opportunity to reset. He pulled his finest midnight blue blazer from his closet. If Jay wanted to play hierarchy games, he'd remind him who invented the damn rulebook. The black car arrived precisely at 6:45. Inside, ambient jazz played softly. No driver spoke. The windows were tinted too dark to see through. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a secluded estate nestled in the Palo Alto hills. Clean lines, modern design, tall glass walls glowing warmly against the dusk. Valets waited like sentinels. Elliot stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks. He was led inside without a word. The dining room was intimate, sleek. A long mahogany table stretched beneath a chandelier of hand-blown glass. 6 seats, 5 already filled. At the head sat Jay, relaxed and confident. Around him, key executives, some board members, all in hushed conversation. But it was the sixth seat, the one directly across from Elliot, that stopped him cold. Lena. Her hair was pulled into a soft twist, her dress a rich emerald green. Elegant, composed. Her eyes, those same eyes he'd looked away from 20 years ago, met his unwavering. For a second, the air left his lungs. He took a slow step forward, forcing composure. "Lena," he said. She gave a polite nod. "Mr. Crane." That hurt more than any slap. He turned to Jay, voice low. "What is this?" "A dinner," Jay said smoothly, gesturing for him to sit. "Family is everything in our company culture." Elliot hesitated, then sat stiffly. Every movement suddenly felt watched, every breath calculated. The meal began, courses flowing, conversation light. But beneath it all, tension coiled like a viper under silk. Jay poured wine for everyone, then rose, glass in hand. "I wanted to thank you all," he began, his tone calm but layered. "This company has become more than I ever imagined, but tonight isn't about earnings or milestones." He turned slowly toward Elliot. "It's about bloodlines." Forks froze midair. Jay's voice sharpened, just slightly. "It's about what's inherited and what's denied." Lena's gaze remained on her wine, calm, measured. Elliot's heart began to pound. Jay held up a hand. "No, let me finish." He took a slow sip, then placed the glass down. Some men walk away from the most important investment of their life, without even looking back. But the thing about legacy, he said, his eyes locking onto Elliot's, is that it doesn't go away. It watches, it builds, and one day it invites you to dinner. Silence. Jay turned to Lena. "Mom, would you like to say anything?" Elliot went pale. Lena finally looked up, eyes clear and sharp. "I already said what I needed to. 18 years ago." Jay's gaze never left Elliot. "Welcome to the table, Dad." The silence after Jay's words hung heavier than any verdict. "Welcome to the table, Dad." Elliot blinked once, twice. He stared at Jay as if seeing him for the first time, not as the polished CEO, but as the ghost of a life he chose to erase. Lena said nothing. No one at the table moved. Jay leaned forward, slightly, hands folded. "You walked away from me before I had a name. Now you wear mine on your contract." Elliot's jaw tightened. "You invited me under false pretenses." Jay shrugged. "No, I offered you exactly what you crave: power, influence, prestige. You didn't ask who I was, you just saw the dollar signs. I thought you wanted a mentor." Jay's lips curved, but there was no warmth. "I wanted leverage. I wanted to feel what you felt when you saw a life and chose to walk away like it was disposable. I wanted to own your time the way you stole mine." Lena lowered her gaze. She didn't flinch. She didn't defend. She just let it unfold. Elliot stood abruptly. "This is emotional extortion." Jay didn't stop him. "Go ahead, walk out again." He waited until Elliot took 2 steps toward the door. Then, "You might want to reread section 14.2 of your contract." Elliot paused. Jay reached into a folder beside him and slid a copy of the agreement across the table. "Termination clause. If you resign before the 12-month term, all IP contributions during your time here become property of Lennox Innovations, and a breach of contract disclosure is sent to our press partners." Elliot's eyes scanned the document. There it was, legal, binding, ruthless. "I've worked too long to let a bitter child destroy my name," Elliot hissed. Jay stood slowly. "Oh, I don't want to destroy your name. I want you to watch what I become while you're stuck under mine." Lena spoke for the first time, her voice low. "He doesn't want your apology, Elliot. He wants your silence. Just like you gave him when he was born." Elliot turned to her, something cracking behind his eyes. "Why would you help him do this?" "I didn't," she replied. "I survived so he could." Jay stepped closer now, voice quieter but sharper. "Do you know what it's like to grow Up hearing your name only when someone spit it out in anger? To be told that everything you are came from a man who wanted nothing to do with you? He leaned in. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a world where you looked up and saw me, looking down. Elliot looked at Jay, not the businessman, not the child he abandoned, but something else entirely. A reckoning. He sank slowly back into his chair. What happens now? Jay adjusted his cufflinks, composed. Now you show up. You work. You sit in meetings where your opinions don't matter. You smile for press releases and fade into background noise. You become exactly what you once feared, replaceable. And when the year's up? Elliot asked, voice low. Jay met his eyes. You leave with nothing but your last name. Elliot sat still. Jay walked back to his seat. Dinner resumed as if nothing had happened, but nothing would ever be the same. The first blow came quietly. Forbes' article titled, "The Mirage of Self-Made Men, A Closer Look at Elliot Crane," dropped on a Thursday morning. It was elegant, surgical, highlighted whistleblower statements, named inflated land valuations, showed manipulated zoning deals. From the early 2000s, deals long buried until now, Elliot read it alone in his penthouse suite. He clenched his jaw as he scrolled, scanning paragraphs that framed him not as a visionary, but as a vulture in a suit. His phone buzzed. Call from Legal Affairs, Crane Holdings. He let it ring. It wouldn't stop what was already rolling downhill. Within days, his public image began to fracture. Investors pulled back. 2 podcast hosts labeled him the latest crumbling icon. Twitter turned him into a hashtag. Crane collapse. Then came the leak. A confidential email, once sent by Elliot to a city official, detailing bribes disguised as consulting retainers, found its way into the inboxes of 3 investigative reporters. By the next morning, a full expose aired on a national news segment. At Lennox headquarters, Elliot barged into Jay's office, red-faced, fists trembling. You think this is funny? He growled. Jay didn't look up from his laptop. I think it's overdue. I gave you my time, my name. You gave me what you owed. Jay cut in, finally meeting his eyes. And now I'm returning the favor, with interest. The next board meeting was a trap dressed as a gathering. Elliot entered the room expecting a strategy session. Instead, the board, people he had once dismissed as junior minds, sat in silent judgment. Jay presided at the head, calm and unreadable. One by one, they listed concerns about Elliot's past holdings, conflict of interest allegations, a review of his conduct. A motion passed within the hour. His role as strategic advisor was amended, largely symbolic, non-voting, honorary presence only. Elliot stood frozen as the vote passed. No one made eye contact, not even the intern who once idolized him. Later that week, his bank sent a freeze notice, pending investigation, into foreign accounts tied to shell companies he thought were long forgotten. His corporate card was canceled. His legal counsel stopped answering calls. He called Lena. She didn't answer. He called Jay. It went to voicemail, then, finally, an email. Subject: regarding exit options. Elliot, as per our agreement. Early resignation. Triggers breach clauses and public disclosure of ongoing ethics reviews. However, we can negotiate a quiet departure after 12 months, provided full compliance is maintained. Jay Lennox one morning. Elliot walked into his office to find it smaller. Moved 2 floors down. His nameplate gone. The new room had no windows. He sat in the silence, once again staring at documents no one would read, reports no one would ask for, and updates no one cared about. The phone didn't ring. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was punishment. Outside the building, a digital billboard lit up with the Lennox Innovations logo. The tagline beneath it read, "Built for the future, not the past." Elliot stared up at it from the sidewalk, just another forgotten man in an expensive suit. And in a boardroom high above, Jay watched it all unfold, not with joy, not with hatred, but with the cold satisfaction of a man who turned pain into power. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. The halls of Lennox Innovations were quieter than usual. It was early, just past 7 a.m. Employees hadn't arrived. The coffee machines hadn't started their rhythmic hum. But Elliot Crane stood outside Jay's office, holding a small envelope. In one hand, the weight of it heavier than anything he'd carried in his empire-building years. He didn't knock. He just waited until the motion sensors triggered the glass doors. They parted with a hiss, revealing Jay seated alone at the far end of the office, staring out the window as the city yawned awake. Jay turned when he heard the footsteps. His face gave nothing away. Elliot walked slowly to the desk and placed the envelope down in front of him. No grand speech, no apology, just a gesture. Jay hesitated before opening it. Inside, one old photograph, creased, yellowing at the corners. A newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket, tiny fists in the air. A wristband labeled Baby Crane. Jay stared at it. Elliot didn't speak. He just stood there, waiting. Maybe for forgiveness. Maybe for acknowledgement. Maybe because there was nowhere else left to go. Jay looked up. His voice was quiet, controlled. Now you know what silence feels like. Elliot's face remained unreadable, but his eyes, always hard, always distant, looked aged, dimmed. I didn't come for anything, he finally said. Not pity, not redemption. Jay nodded once. Good, because there isn't any left. Elliot took a breath. I saw the press this morning. You made the Time cover. The Reluctant Titan. Has a ring to it. Jay gave a ghost of a smile. Funny, I wasn't reluctant at all. A long pause. I know what I did, Elliot said, not asking for sympathy. But I didn't expect you to become this. Jay tilted his head. Did you expect me to fail? No. Elliot looked away. I didn't expect you to matter. Jay flinched, just slightly. That was the thing about wounds. They remembered the shape of the blade. Elliot continued, voice hoarse now. The truth is, I didn't think much of you at all, and that's what makes this hard. Jay stood, slow and deliberate. You're here now because there's nowhere else for you to be. Everything you built is falling in on itself, not because I wanted to ruin you, but because you did that all on your own. I just opened the door and let the world see. Elliot looked down at the photo on the desk. He had your eyes, he murmured. Jay froze. He looked at me. Once. That day. Just for a second. Jay's hands curled into fists at his sides. I should have stayed, Elliot said. But I didn't know how to love something that needed me. Jay inhaled sharply but said nothing. I never figured it out, Elliot whispered. Still haven't. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. You win. But it's a lonely kind of victory, isn't it? Jay didn't respond. When the doors closed behind him, the room felt colder. Jay sat back down and stared at the photo. For a long time, he didn't move. Outside, the skyline glittered, proof of success, empire, achievement. He had everything he once dreamed of. Power, wealth, control. But in the quiet, none of it spoke. He ran his thumb across the photo's edge, and for the first time in years, the ambition in his chest gave way to something else. Something hollow. Something human. He turned off his phone, canceled his meetings, and sat alone in the boardroom, rich, respected, and still broken.